Dancing with Lucifer, Deconstructing the Tactics of Mobbing. Rex H. Thurmond IV M.S. Preface. When the argument is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser. Socrates. In 2010, a disturbing shift occurred within my family in Dyersburg, Tennessee. It had been about a month since an unsettling incident with my mother. This wasn't just another fight. It had a malignant intensity to it that stood out, even against the backdrop of her consistently bad behavior over the years. This particular disagreement appeared to be a catalyst for a larger, more troubling shift in the family dynamic. Soon after the argument, my brother and his wife became noticeably distant. They withdrew in a subtle yet profound manner, their eyes occasionally meeting mine with a veiled contempt I'd never seen from them before. Our relationship's previous warmth had been replaced by a palpable coldness that was difficult to ignore. The unsettling aspect was that, after instigating these conflicts, my mother always managed to cast herself as the victim. She was skilled at lighting the fuse and then feigning innocence, portraying herself as the aggrieved party. This behavior, which I later recognized as a type of emotional manipulation commonly used by people with a psychopathic personality, seemed to pervade my relationship with my brother and his wife. I began to piece together the mosaic of half-truths and outright slander she was disseminating against me, motivated by a nagging suspicion that my mother was pulling the strings behind the scenes. When caught in these lies, she deflected with a skill as infuriating as it was astonishing. Despite her attempts to avoid responsibility, her role as the orchestrator of this family conflict became gin clear to me. Confronting my brother about this proved to be a fruitless exercise. When confronted with hard evidence of our mother's manipulative tactics, he unwaveringly supported her. It was as if his judgment had been clouded by a fog of deception so thick that he couldn't see her deception for what it was. His loyalty, however misplaced, reinforced the psychological barriers my mother had erected. This humbling but invaluable experience served as a wake-up call. Despite the fact that I had not yet formally studied psychology, I found myself instinctively drawn to understanding these toxic dynamics. These experiences emphasized the importance of establishing clear emotional boundaries and remaining alert to manipulative tactics. It felt like a crash course in a subject I planned to study more thoroughly later. Faced with the difficult realization that my own mother could be such a destructive force in our family, I embarked on an unintentional but profoundly transformative journey. It was a journey that would later inform my academic interests, shaping my desire to comprehend the complexities of human behavior and relationships. This painful chapter became a touchstone for me, a first foray into the intricate maze of human psychology and emotional manipulation. Although the consequences of this period shook the very foundations of my family relationships, it also laid the groundwork for a better understanding of the nuances of human behavior. In grappling with my mother's deeply rooted manipulations and emotional games, I unintentionally set the stage for my eventual venture into a more systematic exploration of psychology. So, amid the unsettling anxiety of family strife, I took my first step towards comprehending and navigating the complex tapestry of human emotional dynamics. As I reflect on my early adolescence, I realized that the troubling pattern of my mother's behavior was not sudden. It had been percolating subtly, almost insidiously, for much of my life. When my mother worked as a registered nurse for the Tennessee Department of Health, I became aware of it for the first time. Her target back then wasn't a family member, but her boss, the facility director where she worked, a woman I will refer to as Mrs. S. When it came to Mrs. S., my mother had an extensive list of adjectives at her disposal, including incompetent, mean, unprofessional, and a plethora of others. She seemed to delight in spinning elaborate stories about Mrs. S., each portraying the director as some villainous caricature devoid of any redeeming qualities. What struck me the most was my mother's fervor and absolute conviction in her words, as if they were unquestionable gospel. According to my mother, Mrs. S. was the reason everything went wrong at the facility. She was the scapegoat du jour, so to speak. It wasn't just venting or workplace discontent. It was a deliberate and persistent vendetta against her. And as was her modus operandi, my mother would routinely shift from aggressor to victim, portraying herself as a beleaguered subordinate, tragically misunderstood and mistreated by her terrible boss. My adolescent understanding lacked the conceptual framework to categorize what I was seeing at the time, but something didn't feel right. My mother's constant verbal assault on Mrs. S. began to appear as less of a legitimate complaint and more of a pattern, almost a ritualistic need to vilify someone. My mother would throw rocks, so to speak, and then hide behind a mask of vulnerability and innocence. When I had the opportunity to observe Mrs. S. in the other contexts, the inconsistencies became obvious. Whether it was at the health department after school, with my mother, or overheard conversations, the Mrs. S. described by others bore little resemblance to the malevolent figure my mother portrayed. It was as if they were talking about completely different people. This dissonance reinforced my suspicions that my mother's point of view was, at best, skewed, and at worst, purposefully misleading. It took years, and other similarly toxic dynamics within my own family, for me to realize that what I had witnessed in my early adolescence was not an isolated incident, but rather a troubling behavioral pattern. It was a pattern that would have far-reaching consequences, permeating my relationship with my brother and influencing the larger family dynamic. The second vivid instance that highlighted my mother's unsettling behavior pattern occurred after her marriage to her second husband, a man who brought 3 children of his own into the union, a daughter, the oldest, and 2 sons. The family dynamics shifted noticeably after their marriage, but my mother's seemingly inexplicable animosity toward her husband's oldest son stood out prominently. Given her husband's genuine affection and pride for his son, I couldn't help but suspect that the depth of this fatherly love was, ironically, the catalyst for my mother's contempt. My mother's methods were covert but devastatingly effective. She sowed malicious thoughts into the mind of those around her, just as a gardener plants seeds and patiently waits for them to sprout. Her words were carefully chosen and calibrated to strike at the insecurities and fears that exist in every family, particularly a newly blended one. Over time, she labeled her husband's oldest son with a slew of derogatory terms, including thief, addict, and numerous other derogatory terms meant to discredit and marginalize him. She even went so far as insinuation that his oldest son was trying to destroy her marriage. Everyone believed her, including me at the time. Because of the subtlety of her actions, these poisonous ideas were given time to germinate in everyone's minds, gradually reshaping the collective family opinion about her husband's oldest son. Discord had taken root and grown into a thorny thicket of suspicion and mistrust over time. As the shadow of my mother's allegations loomed large over us all, family gatherings became tense and conversations became stilted. The conflict then reached a boiling point. A confrontation between my mother and her husband's oldest son occurred, whether planned, as I expect, or unplanned. My mother, who was always adept at switching from the role of perpetrator to victim, emerged from the fray as the aggrieved party. Those who had been subjected to her long-term misinformation campaign saw this confrontation as evidence, however circumstantial, of her previous claims. The consequences were both immediate and long-lasting. Her husband's relationship with his oldest son shattered under the weight of doubt and discord orchestrated by my mother. The parallels between this situation and my own strained relationship with my brother were haunting. The underlying tactics, the gradual drip of manipulation, and the eventual breakdown of familial bonds were all too familiar. It was a heartbreaking confirmation of what I had suspected for a long time. My mother's behavior was not an isolated set of incidents, but rather a pattern, a deeply ingrained one. She had once again successfully manipulated family dynamics to isolate someone, reinforcing her own perception of being the center of family life. As painful as it was to see this once close relationship with my brother fall apart in this way, it also reaffirmed the importance of recognizing and understanding these patterns for what they were. This wasn't just family drama. It was emotional and psychological warfare, with narratives and relationships manipulated to serve a specific agenda. Recognizing it was critical, not only for academic research in my future studies in psychology, but also for navigating the emotional complexities of my own life. More than that, I knew I needed to keep my children safe from her. As unsettling as these incidents were, they helped shape my understanding of family dynamics, emotional manipulation, and the often disastrous consequences of unchecked toxic behavior. These incidents, each one a case study in emotional manipulation and predatory behavior, formed a dark tapestry of examples that would later inform my academic pursuits. However, they served as a cautionary tale, urging me to be vigilant, to question, and, most importantly, to strive to prevent such toxic dynamics from poisoning future relationships, and, most importantly, to protect my children. As the tension and fractures within my family grew, I felt an increasing need to figure out what was causing this seemingly irreparable discord. My search for answers became an intellectual quest, as if understanding the mechanics of my mother's behavior would give me some sort of control or, at the very least, a way to protect myself emotionally. It was in this climate of interpersonal strife and intellectual thirst that I stumbled upon a seminal work, Stalking the Soul, Emotional Abuse and the Erosion of Identity by Dr. Marie-France Hirigoyen. Opening those pages felt like lifting a veil that had long obscured my understanding. Dr. Hirigoyen's meticulous examination of emotional abuse struck me like a bolt of lightning. She defined the forms and mechanisms of this subtle but lethal form of aggression, laying out its nuances with academic rigor, but in terms that any layperson could understand. As I read through the chapters, I came across a term that appeared to have been coined specifically to describe my mother's behavior: mobbing. Dr. Hirigoyen defined mobbing as a dangerous form of relational aggression perpetrated by a psychopathic or near-psychopathic individual. The strategy is as simple as it is lethal. Gradually turn a group against a specific individual with the ultimate goal of driving them away. The target is isolated, discredited, and emotionally abused to the point where they have no choice but to withdraw, thereby fulfilling the perpetrator's twisted goals. For the first time, I had a conceptual framework and vocabulary to express what was going on in my family. My mother wasn't just a difficult or complex person. She was engaged in a systematic form of emotional and psychological warfare with a name, scholarly validation, and, most importantly, was understood to be harmful in the most profound sense. The book not only clarified my understanding, but gave me confidence. With this newfound knowledge, the feelings of confusion and helplessness that had plagued me for so long began to fade. While the term mobbing was academic in nature, the recognition it provided was profoundly personal. It confirmed that the chaotic dynamics I had observed were neither normal nor acceptable. They were abusive tactics designed to undermine an individual's sense of self and well-being. It was an indirect form of attempted murder. This realization did not magically mend my family's fractured relationships, nor did it deter my mother from continuing her destructive patterns, but it provided me with the intellectual and emotional tools I needed to recognize and combat such toxicity. Furthermore, it served as a springboard for more in-depth psychological research, particularly in the areas of emotional abuse, manipulation, and personality disorders, which I would later pursue academically. The discovery of Dr. Hirigoyen's work was another watershed moment in my life. My mission became an impassioned commitment to educate others about the danger of mobbing and similar behaviors from that point forward, rather than just self-preservation. The knowledge I gained enabled me to approach these complex and painful issues not as a victim or bystander, but as an informed and empowered individual. Even though my family dynamics remain tense to this day, my intellectual and emotional landscape had irreversibly expanded, laying the groundwork for the academic and personal adventures that lay ahead. Rex Henry Thurmond IV, M.S.C., January 14th, 2024. Introduction: A Dance with the Devil. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. Joseph Goebbels, Adolf Hitler's Minister of Propaganda. Some people are blatantly evil. There's just no other way to put it. As I have gotten older, through my own experiences as well as what I have witnessed, I've learned this simple truth beyond the shadow of a doubt. In psychological and social dynamics, the phenomenon of mobbing or group bullying and ostracization has devastating consequences for the targeted individual. To make sense of complex situations in social interactions, humans frequently rely on a combination of cognitive shortcuts and emotionally charged narratives. When a person becomes the target of mobbing, their pre-existing prejudices, manipulative narratives, and psychological conditioning within the group often exacerbate their unfortunate situation. The collective mind turns against them, viewing them through a lens that only reflects negative stereotypes like crazy, dangerous, or addicted. This predisposed viewpoint does not emerge overnight. Rather, it is carefully cultivated over time. Those who instigate mobbing knowingly lay the groundwork by repeatedly portraying the target negatively. Subtle hints, insinuations, and outright false accusations shape the group's perception. This narrative gains traction over time and eventually becomes the dominant paradigm through which the group views the victim. When the targeted person tries to argue their case, their words are met with a psychological wall fortified by cognitive biases and emotional reasoning. The group, which is already prejudiced against them, interprets the victim's plea not as genuine cry for justice, but as further evidence of their perceived flaws. When defending themselves, the victim becomes emotional and is labeled unstable. They're accused of manipulation or cunning if they present logical arguments. Silence is interpreted as guilt or apathy if they remain silent. In essence, every move they make tightens the noose. The more the victim struggles in this Kafkaesque situation, the deeper they sink into the quicksand of the group judgment. It's a vicious circle. Every attempt to clear their name only adds fuel to the fire of the group's skepticism. The paradoxical nature of the mob's mindset makes this especially insidious. Their negative perception of the victim is not only resistant to change, but is also reinforced by the victim's attempts to challenge it. Even irrefutable evidence can be twisted to fit the dominant narrative. The psychological underpinnings of this situation are rooted in a variety of mechanisms, including confirmation bias, which occurs when people are more likely to accept information that confirms their pre-existing beliefs and disregard information that challenges them. Furthermore, the identity of the mob becomes entwined with the act of ostracizing the victim, creating a us versus them mentality that further alienates the targeted individual. As a result, the individual is trapped in a social catch-22 in which their every word and action, rather than alleviating their plight, only deepens their social grave. The mob, buoyed by a false sense of moral superiority, continues its ostracization, unmoved, if not galvanized, by the victim's pleas. As a result, the cycle of mobbing not only continues but becomes increasingly difficult to break, trapping the victim in a social maze with no obvious way out. In the face of such daunting dynamics, addressing the underlying causes of mob mentality and cultivating an environment conducive to critical thinking and open dialogue are critical steps towards breaking the vicious cycle. However, for the individual caught up in such a situation, the options for redress are frighteningly limited, frequently necessitating intervention from an unbiased third party, or organizational systems, or even legal avenues to reset the narrative and restore their tarnished reputation. It's important to note that both male and female individuals can engage in manipulative behavior in the complex landscape of human social interaction. However, a growing body of research suggests that the tactics used may differ depending on gender. Female psychopaths, a subset of the broader category of psychopathy, can be especially skilled at exploiting social dynamics, often in covert ways. When they decide to target an individual within a group, they frequently employ subtlety, guile, and a thorough understanding of human psychology and social dynamics. For the purposes of this book, we will concentrate on the tactics used by female psychopaths to isolate and drive out a specific target from a group setting. The first step is frequently to identify a vulnerable target, someone who, for various reasons, may be more vulnerable to manipulative tactics. This could be someone less socially adept, new to the group, or simply someone whose absence would benefit the female psychopath's agenda. The phase of subtle manipulation begins once a target is identified. Unlike their male counterparts, who may begin with overt aggression or grandiose displays of dominance, female psychopaths frequently begin with the spread of rumors, gossip, or strategic sharing of sensitive information. The goal is to create a narrative about the target that will serve as the lens through which the group perceives the individual. Covert manipulation techniques, such as triangulation, are frequently used. The female psychopath may give different accounts or versions of events to different members of the group, causing confusion and mistrust. They fragment the group's coherence by forming factions or many alliances, making it easier to isolate the target. They may also use mirroring to endear themselves to others in the group, mimicking their interests and viewpoints in order to appear as an indispensable or irreplaceable member. This stands in stark contrast to the increasingly marginalized target, emphasizing their ostensibly outcast status. As previously stated, once a negative preconception about the target is established, any attempt by the victim to defend themselves usually backfires. Negative stereotypes or accusations may include descriptors such as untrustworthy, sensitive, or difficult, priming the group for a specific reaction. Female psychopaths are often adept at reading social cues and emotional states, allowing them to predict how the group and target will react. They take advantage of this by planning their tactics in such a way that they elicit the desired reaction from both parties. The toxic environment created by these machinations begin to harm the target. their professional performance may suffer, or they may exhibit signs of emotional stress, such as increased anxiety, lower self-esteem, or even depressive symptoms. The group then interprets these signs of stress as validation of the narratives and labels that have been previously assigned to the target. The female psychopath may use these behavioral changes as evidence, cementing the group's increasingly negative view of the targeted individual. The irony is palpable. The target's reactions, which are normal reactions to abnormal levels of social stress and manipulation, are used to justify their exclusion. Furthermore, female psychopaths frequently excel at playing the victim, twisting the narrative to make it appear as if they, rather than the person they're targeting, are being mistreated. This tactic is extremely effective because it not only discredits the target, but also elicits sympathy and support for the female psychopath, reinforcing her social position within the group. In many cases, the situation reaches a tipping point where the targeted individual is forced to leave the group or leaves voluntarily to escape the relentless psychological torment. When the target is gone, the group may feel a brief sense of relief or unity, attributing the reduction in tension to the absence of the problematic individual rather than recognizing the manipulative tactics that led to their departure. The exit of the targeted individual frequently serves to reinforce the social standing of the female psychopath. She may be praised for her strength in dealing with this difficult person or situation, securing her place within the group. With the target no longer present and her status elevated, she may seek out a new target and repeat the cycle, all while maintaining a facade of normalcy and emotional stability to conceal her manipulative actions. Female psychopaths use a variety of sophisticated covert tactics to isolate and eliminate a specific target from a group setting. They manipulate perceptions, sow discord, and create an environment in which the targeted individual's attempt to defend themselves only serve to tighten the metaphorical noose by utilizing their keen understanding of human psychology and social dynamics. Through these intricate schemes, the female psychopath not only successfully drives the target out of the group, but also solidifies her own position within it, often without raising the slightest suspicion about her true intentions. Because of the insidious nature of these tactics, as well as the psychological toll they take on the targeted individual, this type of manipulation is one of the most damaging and difficult to combat. Navigating the complex landscape of group dynamics and interpersonal relationships, particularly when highly manipulative and evil individuals are involved, is likened to a perilous dance with the devil. The steps in this intricate ballet are deceptive, the music is discordant, and the stage is riddled with traps. The female psychopath, like the devil in folklore, presents a facade that belies the chaos they intend to unleash. The dance starts off slowly, almost imperceptibly. To establish the desired narrative, the female psychopath begins a dance of whispers, rumors, and half-truths. As the other dancers, the group members, get swept up in the rhythm, they become unwitting participants in a performance designed to isolate and condemn one of them, the chosen target. The victim walks into this dance unprepared, not realizing that the floor beneath them is already slick with the oil of preconceptions and bias. When they try to argue their case, change the tempo, or correct the choreography, their efforts are futile. Every step they take, every plea they make, only serves to trip them up even more, tightening the noose in a dance where the devil has already dictated the terms. Meanwhile, the female psychopath moves with calculated grace, bouncing between group alliances and rivalries. Their movements are fluid, and their steps are always precisely timed to deepen the cracks they've already created. The group loses sight of the original choreography as they effortlessly leap and twirl, playing different roles for different people, blind to the puppeteer pulling the strings. The contrast between the female psychopath's apparent poise and the target's stumbling becomes the focal point of the performance, bolstering the narrative that the latter is inherently flawed, troubled, or deserving of exclusion. As the dance progresses, the female psychopath may take on the role of the victim, a damsel in distress, besieged by the target's alleged malevolence and incompetence. This role reversal is the climax of the devil's ballet, a masterstroke that not only vindicates the female psychopath, but also galvanizes the group into believing that the targeted individual's exit is a collective act of liberation. When the dance is finished and the target is driven from the group, a deceptive calm settles over the group. The devil takes a bow, praising their tenacity and fortitude. The group applauds in unison, relieved but unknowingly compromised, mistaking the female psychopath's cunning for virtue. They prepare to dance again, oblivious to the fact that they've been pawns in a malevolent performance, unwittingly awaiting the selection of the next target. As a result, the devil's dance continues, cyclical in its cruelty, insidious in its subtlety, and devastating in its impact. While the group may believe they've performed a ballet of justice and moral clarity, they've actually danced to a tune composed in the depths of deception, manipulation, and pure evil. The devil's dance card is always open, the stage set for another performance in the never-ending theater of human folly and vulnerability. The phenomenon of mobbing, a term that is less familiar to many but has a profound impact in many areas of life, is the central theme of this book, Dancing with Lucifer, Deconstructing the Tactics of Mobbing. The goal of this book is to decipher the complexities of mobbing, an insidious form of collective aggression that has infiltrated various aspects of society, from workplaces and educational institutions to the digital realm and even within the confines of family dynamics. This introductory chapter aims to lay the groundwork for a more in-depth examination of mobbing by defining its contours, comprehending its significance in contemporary society, and distinguishing it from more commonly understood concepts of bullying. Mobbing. Definition and importance. Mobbing is a type of psychological bullying or harassment in which an individual or group targets a person for hostile and unethical communication, usually in a workplace or community. Mobbing, as opposed to other types of harassment, is distinguished by its collective nature, in which multiple individuals engage in a sustained campaign of aggression against a targeted individual. This phenomenon is more than a series of random acts of hostility. It is a systematic campaign that escalates over time, frequently causing severe psychological and emotional distress in the victim. The importance of mobbing in modern society cannot be overstated. In a world where social dynamics are becoming increasingly complex and interpersonal relationships are frequently mediated through digital platforms, the impact of mobbing extends beyond the victim's immediate surroundings. The consequences of such collective aggression can be seen in lower workplace productivity, increased mental health issues, disruption in educational settings, and overall community well-being. Furthermore, mobbing reflects and perpetuates larger societal issues like power disparities, social conformity, and the human proclivity for groupthink. Traditional bullying versus mobbing. While mobbing and traditional bullying share some characteristics, such as the intent to harm and the presence of a power imbalance, there are significant differences between the two. Traditional bullying typically involves an individual's repeated aggressive behavior toward another, focusing on physical, verbal, or social harm. Because of its individual nature, this type of bullying is often more visible and at times easier to address. Mobbing, on the other hand, is a more subtle form of aggression. It requires a group effort, which makes it difficult to identify and confront. Mobbing's group dynamic also creates a diffusion of responsibility where individual mob members may not perceive their actions as harmful due to the involvement of others. Furthermore, mobbing is more psychological in nature, involving tactics like gossip, exclusion, and undermining a person's reputation and work. Another significant distinction is found in the context. While traditional bullying is often associated with schools and childhood, mobbing is more common in adult settings such as the workplace, educational institutions, families, and other group settings. The nature and impact of the aggression are also influenced by the difference in context. Mobbing in adult settings can have serious consequences for a person's career, social standing, and mental health. Understanding these distinctions is crucial for dealing with mobbing effectively. While anti-bullying strategies may be helpful, the complex dynamics of mobbing necessitates a more nuanced approach that takes into account the collective nature of the aggression, the adult environments in which it occurs, and the psychological tactics used. The book's scope. Dancing with Lucifer, Deconstructing the Tactics of Mobbing seeks to provide an in-depth examination of mobbing in a variety of contexts. The book will delve into workplace mobbing, using examples from nursing and academic sectors to show how this phenomenon manifests in professional settings. It will also look at mobbing within families, which is often overlooked but has serious consequences for individual well-being and family dynamics. The book will also look into the phenomenon of cybermobbing, which is a relatively new but rapidly growing concern in the digital age. This section will look at how technology and social media platforms facilitate collective aggression, as well as the unique challenges that this virtual form of mobbing presents. In addition to these contexts, the book will investigate other group dynamics that contribute to mobbing, providing a thorough understanding of how various social, cultural, and organizational factors interact to facilitate this form of aggression. Finally, the book will delve into offender psychology, providing insights into the motivations and characteristics of those who engage in mobbing. Dancing with Lucifer, Deconstructing the Tactics of Mobbing aims to provide a holistic view of mobbing by covering these diverse areas, equipping readers with the knowledge to identify, understand, and address this complex social phenomenon. The book hopes to contribute to the larger conversation about creating healthier, more respectful, and inclusive environments in all spheres of society through this exploration. Epilogue. The dance ends, the journey continues. Sometimes the smallest step in the right direction ends up being the biggest step of your life. Tiptoe if you must, but take the step. Naeem Calloway. In the preface of this work, I shared a deeply personal narrative, my own harrowing experience with mobbing. This experience, spearheaded by my mother, saw the insidious disintegration of the most sacred of my relationships, turning my family, the very embodiment of trust and love, into a source of alienation and pain. Reflecting on this journey now, in the concluding pages of our exploration, it's time to look back at the path trodden and the path that lies ahead. The impact of mobbing within the family, especially by a maternal figure, is a profound betrayal that cuts deep into the fabric of one's identity and sense of safety. My mother, a central figure in my life, orchestrated a vendetta against me that led to the unraveling of bonds I held dear. Each act of hostility from family members, including those who I once believed would stand by me through thick and thin, was a blow to my sense of self and belonging. The most painful of these was the estrangement from my brother, with whom I shared countless memories and a bond that I thought was unbreakable. The tactics used in my family's mobbing were subtle yet devastating. My mother's influence was like a slow-acting poison, tainting perceptions and turning love into resentment. What started as small misunderstandings and miscommunications snowballed into outright hostility. It was a systematic dismantling of my relationships, leaving me isolated at a time when I needed support the most. Despite the pain, this experience has been a crucible for transformation. Surviving mobbing has taught me resilience and the importance of self-reliance. It has forced me to reevaluate the meaning of family and relationships. My children and cousin Michael Beavis remain my pillars of strength, their love and support unwavering in the face of this familial storm. The journey of healing from mobbing is intricate and ongoing. It involves grappling with feelings of betrayal, rebuilding one's sense of self, and perhaps most challenging, navigating the path toward forgiveness. Forgiving my family, including my mother and brother, is not about absolving them of their actions or forgetting the pain caused. It's about freeing myself from the grip of bitterness and reclaiming my peace. As this book closes, my story and the stories of many others within these pages stand as testaments to the human spirit's resilience. To anyone facing mobbing, especially within the family, know this: you are not defined by the hostility and rejection of others. Your worth and identity are intrinsic and cannot be tarnished by the actions of those who should have been your protectors and supporters. The dance with Lucifer, as harrowing as it was, is not the end of my story. It's a chapter that has taught me, shaped me, and propelled me toward a future where I'm the author of my narrative. As I continue on this journey, I carry with me the lessons learned, the strength gained, and a heart that, despite its scars, remains open to love and trust. Surviving mobbing, especially when orchestrated by those closest to you, is an ordeal that can shake the very foundations of one's existence. My personal experience with mobbing, as shared in this book, was not just a painful chapter in my life. It was an abyss into which I was mercilessly thrown, the worst experience I have ever endured. It eclipsed every other challenge I had faced, leaving them pale in comparison. The mobbing triggered a cascade of devastating effects in my life. Developmental trauma and CPTSD, intertwined with major depression and crippling anxiety, became my constant companions. These mental health struggles robbed me of my stability and peace, pushing me into a life marked by uncertainty and despair. For 5 years, I grappled with homelessness, a period that tested my limits and challenged my endurance. The experience was not just a lack of physical shelter. It was a state of being perpetually lost, disconnected from a sense of community and belonging. Had it not been for the unwavering support of my best friend and my cousin, I might have found myself utterly alone and in the street, a fate that seemed all too real and terrifying. The stress and trauma manifested not just emotionally and psychologically, but also physically. I developed type 2 diabetes, a condition exacerbated by the turmoil of my life. My blood pressure often spiked to dangerous levels, a silent yet potent threat to my well-being. There were days when I did not have enough money to eat. There were moments of such profound sadness that I felt close to death. And in those dark moments, I found myself indifferent to the prospect of dying. In the face of these overwhelming adversities, one unlikely source of resilience emerged: a defiant refusal to succumb to the wishes of those who had orchestrated my downfall. I believe my mother and brother wanted not only to see me defeated, I believe they wanted me dead. The thought of granting them this satisfaction was intolerable. This conviction, as grim as it was, became a lifeline in my darkest moments. It fueled a stubborn will to survive, to keep my head above water despite the crushing weight of my circumstances. The idea of suicide, a seemingly constant presence lurking in the shadows of my thoughts, was something I contemplated many times. Yet, each time, a fierce determination surged within me, a refusal to give my mother and brother the satisfaction of seeing me completely destroyed. This resistance, this refusal to let them win, was the ember of defiance that kept hope alive, faint but unextinguished. Looking back, it is this resilience, this refusal to be vanquished, that has been my savior. My life's journey has been one of battling overwhelming odds, of facing the darkest aspects of human behavior and its impact on the soul. Yet, it is also a testament to the indomitable spirit that resides within each of us, a spirit that refuses to be extinguished, even in the face of the gravest trials. In sharing this narrative, I hope to offer not just a glimpse into the harrowing realities of mobbing and its aftermath, but also to illuminate the path of resilience that can guide one out of the darkness. This journey, though marked by pain and loss, is also a journey toward reclaiming one's life and rediscovering strength in the face of adversity. The year 2018 marked a pivotal turning point in my life, a period where the tides of life began to shift from despair to hope, from stagnation to progress. Despite the overwhelming challenges faced in the wake of the mobbing and its consequent trauma, that year brought opportunities that set me on a path to recovery and self-empowerment. It all started with a driving job, while unconventional, offered a glimmer of hope. For that, I'm eternally grateful to Jim and Kelly Collins. Living in the back of a Sprinter van for over a year, I embarked on a journey that was not just about navigating the roads, but also steering my life toward a new direction. This unique living situation, though challenging, became a space of transformation, as well as having the opportunity to see most of the country. I had more fun that year than should have been allowed. During this time, I took significant steps to rebuild my life. I filed my back taxes, an important step in regaining financial stability. More importantly, I enrolled in the online graduate program in clinical psychology at Walden University. The back of that Sprinter van became my classroom, my study, my place of learning. There, I earned approximately half my master's degree, a testament to my resilience and determination. The journey was further propelled by the financial aid I received. With the $4,000 from my student loan, I was able to obtain my commercial driver's license, opening new avenues in my professional life. I was finally earning enough money to get my life back on track. This achievement was not just a step toward a stable career. It was a symbol of my ability to overcome and advance despite the odds. I'm eternally grateful to my old friend Jeff Buckner, who offered me a chance when no one else would. His willingness to hire me despite my lack of experience was a turning point. It was the helping hand I needed to pull myself out of the depths of despair. This opportunity allowed me to move to Franklin, Tennessee and start anew. In March of 2020, I landed a rewarding job that marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Since then, things have been looking up, a far cry from the desolate days of homelessness, alcoholism, and despair. The experiences of mobbing and the subsequent journey of recovery have profoundly shaped my perspective and purpose. Spreading awareness about the grave dangers of mobbing and the destructive nature of personality and character disorder perpetrators has become my life's mission. This mission is driven by the belief that awareness can be a powerful tool in preventing the suffering of others. There's a deep sense of satisfaction in knowing that my experiences, my story, could literally save someone's life through raising awareness. Sharing my journey, with all its lows and highs, is more than a personal narrative. It's a beacon of hope for others who might be facing similar challenges. It's a message that, despite the darkness of mobbing, there is a path to recovery, to rebuilding, and to finding meaning and purpose in the aftermath. As I reflect on this journey, from the depths of despair in the back of a Sprinter van to pursuing a graduate degree and rebuilding my life in a new city, I'm reminded of the power of resilience, the importance of support, and the potential for personal growth, even in the most challenging circumstances. My story is one of not just surviving, but thriving against the odds, and it stands as a testament to the strength and resilience that lies within each of us. As we reach the conclusion of this work, it becomes crucial to underscore a fundamental truth. Mobbing is not merely a personal or workplace conflict. It is a form of psychological violence. Its impacts are deep and long-lasting, affecting individuals at their very core. My experiences, along with countless others, testify to the fact that mobbing should be recognized and treated as a violent crime. The insidious nature of mobbing, often cloaked in the guise of subtle aggression or covert hostility, makes it a particularly dangerous form of abuse. It is imperative that both criminal and civil laws reflect the severity of this act. Just as physical violence is punishable under law, so too should mobbing perpetrators be subject to stringent legal consequences. Perpetrators of mobbing should be held accountable for their actions, facing both criminal charges and civil liabilities for the trauma and harm they inflict. With a renewed sense of purpose and armed with personal experience, I'm committed to ensuring that mobbing becomes a universally recognized and understood term. The lack of widespread recognition of mobbing belies its prevalence and the devastation it can wreak on individuals' lives. Raising awareness is the first critical step in combating this form of violence. It is only through broad understanding and acknowledgement of mobbing that we can begin to protect potential victims and provide support to those already suffering its consequences. The harm caused by mobbing extends beyond the immediate psychological and emotional damage. It can lead to long-term mental health issues, impact physical well-being, and disrupt one's social and professional life. The ripple effect of mobbing can be observed in broken families, lost careers, and in the most tragic cases, lost lives. The gravity of these outcomes necessitates that mobbing be viewed and treated with the seriousness it deserves. My journey through and beyond the realm of mobbing has instilled in me a determination to fight against this form of psychological violence. I will not rest until the term mobbing is not only universally known, but also universally acknowledged as a serious, damaging, and unacceptable behavior. My mission is to advocate for those who have been silenced, to educate society about the realities of mobbing, and to push for legal reforms that recognize and address this form of abuse. In sharing my story, it is my hope that it serves as both a cautionary tale and a source of empowerment. For those who have suffered from mobbing, may you find validation and strength in these pages. For society at large, may this book be a call to action to recognize, prevent, and penalize mobbing. The journey to bring about this change will undoubtedly be challenging, but it is a journey that I, and hopefully many others, will undertake with unwavering commitment. Together we can work towards a future where mobbing is not just recognized but eradicated, and where the psychological safety of individuals in workplaces, families, and social settings is upheld and protected.